is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
It's a Blood Red podcast courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along as we get set to talk fans returning to Anfield, Jurgen Klopp's Trent boost, and can the Reds keep the Wolves from the door? Here to get into all of that, as well as our team selections and match predictions, Paul Gorst, Matt Addison and Peter Harris. Hope that you're all well, gentlemen. I'll come to you first, Gorsty. You were, of course, at Anfield in midweek for the game with Ajax, and it seems as though that was the last time you're going to be inside an empty Anfield.
Yes, thank God for that. It's been a weird one at times. I mean, some games you kind of block it out and you're just focusing on what you need to do and your reports and whatever else. But there's some that it's just really hammered home that it's just not right and it's weird and perverse. And I think I mentioned this before, but the one for me was probably the Michelin one in the Champions League, because we know how big and kind of celebrated the Champions League nights are at Anfield, and there's always the big hullabaloo about what it means and so on. And then Liverpool are playing a team who not everyone was particularly familiar with. It was a freezing cold night. There was absolutely no one there to watch it. Had a bit of a training ground kind of feel to it, and it was just a really strange one. So thankfully it hasn't kind of dragged on too much longer than that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what it's going to be like on Sunday. I mean, it's only 2,000, so they're not going to be creating a huge amount of noise by any stretch. But I think, given the circumstances and so on, they're going to be making a hell of a lot more of a noise than what 2,000 fans would normally be able to make. And given the fact that it's an evening game as well, I think they'll be entering into the ground in good spirits, and looking forward to seeing the Kop a little bit more populated than it has been the last 6 months.
Yeah, that might take a bit of sort of re-getting used to, won't it, Matt? Seeing the Kop without all of those flags and everything on, and obviously with a socially distanced crowd in there, but just great to see people back on the Kop.
Yeah, exactly that. It's fantastic to see people starting to come back. And as Gorsty says, it's only a very, very small number of people, but I do think it will make a bigger difference than what it should do proportionally. Obviously, normally they'd be, 54,000 inside Anfield, or certainly not normally, but in previous normal times at least. And I think even the 2,000 being there will be a big thing for the players. I think that's something that they'll really look forward to. We saw Jurgen Klopp earlier today alluding to a very similar thing, that, for those 2,000, it'll be very exciting. But I think for the players, it'll make a huge difference. And even for people watching at home on the television, to be able to just have, instead of that artificial crowd noise, to have the actual sound of actual people celebrating goals and things like that, it just really sets it up really nicely. And I think, obviously Wolves are one of the teams that are not in tier 2. I think they're still in tier 3, so they're not allowed fans in their stadium. But I think even for them, this is a step forward. It's certainly something that we want to see. I've not actually seen the Arsenal game from last night, but I know they in the Europa League had a small number of fans in there as well. And I'm sure you'll know better than me, Guy, how much of a difference that would have made to watch that. So, yeah, it's hugely exciting to have even such a small number back. I do think it'll make a real tangible difference for Liverpool and the way that they play potentially as well.
Yeah, it was actually a EFL pilot event back in September, actually, with only 1,000 fans in the ground. But I think you might sort of notice, Gorsty, on Sunday, actually, just how much of a difference it makes, albeit thinking 2,000 is probably not that many. But let's talk a bit about the game itself. And Peter, it was a real strong night for the academy against Ajax. Jurgen Klopp rung the changes, and the young lads certainly put in a shift.
Yeah, it was a wonderful result. It was great to see. I think it was a Klopp on the final whistle kind of personified everything that it meant. As soon as the whistle went, he was straight on the pitch, straight to his goalkeeper, giving him that big hug, a pat on the back. It was wonderful to see after you hear about Alisson injury and you fear the worst. Here we go again. It's another one. What's going to happen? It was a big moment, big night for him to see him perform, get a clean sheet as well. Against Ajax, that's no mean feat. He was called upon on numerous occasions, and he has put his name in the hat, as it were, for the weekend. So, and even Neco Williams as well. We all know about the publicised kind of criticism he's had, trying to live up to that Trent Alexander-Arnold performances. And I think he really put a strong foot forward in making sure he can keep his spot as well for the weekend.
I know we spoke a couple of weeks ago, Gorsty, about sort of Curtis Jones and the trust he seems to have won of Jurgen Klopp now, and sort of quite fitting that on a night where a number of academy graduates did star, that he was the one who got the goal. But I don't think we can sort of understate how big a night in the career of Caoimhin Kelleher, and even maybe Neco Williams in sort of dealing with that criticism he's had to put in the shift he did.
Yeah, no question. Just before I answer that, guy, I've just got to point out Peter's background there with the front page of the Echo. I think that's great. I'm going to have to get that myself, I think. But yeah, I mean, I wrote it in the match verdict. I think it was a bit of a famous night for the staff of the academy when you think of Caoimhin Kelleher starring in goal, Neco Williams getting the assist, and Curtis Jones getting the winner on a game that's taken Liverpool into the knockout stages of the Champions League against a team as famous as Ajax. I wrote about Jones last week, and it just seems to be a growing maturity to his game. Last season, we've seen it in flashes. We've seen what he was capable of with the goals against Shrewsbury, and obviously in particular the one against Everton. He was the captain against Shrewsbury in the replay, and little flashes of skill and flair here and there, which we all know that he's got. Anyone who's seen him at academy level for the last few years knows all about that. But this season, there's kind of less of that, and he's more impressive by just keeping it simple in a way, just kind of adapting to what is needed in a Liverpool midfield, the pressing, the closing down, the chasing back, something that not a lot of people have kind of seen to his game over the last few years, because he hasn't really had to do it much. Whenever he's been played in the first team, it's to come on and kind of have an impact in games where Liverpool are already quite comfortable, and they might have a 2-0 or 3-0 lead or whatever it is, or in cup games. So it's he's been one of the quiet success stories of the season, I'd say, and to the point now where when he plays, you don't really think twice about it. It's not a big deal. It's not something that you raise your eyebrow about. It's just another player for this Liverpool squad. So it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of continues this upward curve over the coming months.
And that's the thing, isn't it, Matt? Is last year when we sort of saw a number of the young players, in particular in that FA Cup game with Shrewsbury, everyone was impressed then. But then to jump from that up to Champions League level to a game that Liverpool needed a result against the side that, of course, a couple of years back reached the semi-finals of the Champions League, and now it ensures that Liverpool's final game of the Champions League group phase is pretty much a non-event for them. It just shows just how much quality this academy side have produced, and I suppose you've seen a number of these guys come through the ranks, and you must be I don't know, maybe a bit surprised in just how easily they've adapted to making that leap.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of been the thing ever since Jurgen Klopp came in particular. There's been a big emphasis on making sure that the academy teams play in the exact same way that the first team play. Obviously, that is going to be reinforced even more over the next few years, obviously, with the move now to Kirby with the first team. And I think we've seen it plenty of times with Curtis Jones, but I think we've seen it more and more with Neco Williams. We've seen, obviously, him take a big step forward, I think, in the Champions League. He had Jordan Henderson there talking him through the game. He had, the better players around him, and suddenly he looks at a much better player than what he had done, last week at Brighton. So, yeah, it's one of those where, with Caoimhin Kelleher as well, that the reason that he was brought in, Jurgen Klopp said, was to be able to use his footballing ability, his skills on the ball with the ball at his feet. And I think we saw that. It's obviously a huge task to come in and replace a goalkeeper as good as Alisson, but it's certainly in terms of, with his feet and that sort of thing, particularly in the second half, I thought he was, really, really impressive in that regard. So, yeah, it's just about having those players that you can plug into the system and not really see too much of a drop off in terms of the style and that sort of thing. Of course, these players are not as good as the first choice players, but if you can be as close to that in terms of the style and the way that you play, obviously, as we saw, that limits the sort of difference between, a normal team and a slightly weakened team, if you like. So, yeah, it was great to see them all come through and play as well as they all did. And to be honest, it's not a massive surprise. I think Kelleher was the biggest surprise, just because it was a bit of a shock. It was anticipated that it was going to be Adrian who was going to be in there, but he more than vindicated that decision. And now it would be a huge shock if it wasn't Kelleher between the sticks on Sunday. So yeah, a great night for the academy, no doubt about that.
Yeah, certainly. Gorst, I'll come back to you on this one. Let's move sort of on to this afternoon's press conference and look ahead to the Wolves game. And Jurgen Klopp asks, as always, about team news and has a pretty big update for the Reds.
Yeah, Naby Keita and Trent Alexander-Arnold, he said, have got the best chance of perhaps featuring on Sunday. I think that there's a training session this evening which will tell us a little bit more, because we know Klopp likes to have players in with the main group twice before they're kind of considered for selection. And he said maybe if they're really struggling, then that will kind of get fast-tracked through to just a one. And I think you could probably make the case for Liverpool being in that struggling scenario at the moment. So I think both could be in line for a recall on Sunday. I don't think either will start. I think probably Alexander-Arnold has got the best chance out of the two, just in terms of the numbers that are at Klopp's disposal at right back and central midfield. But yeah, it's good news, isn't it? It eases the injury crisis quite a lot. I think Liverpool are up to 9 at the moment, with first team players out injured, so that brings it down quite a lot. And I think Klopp was kind of keen to say how much playing Tuesday evening and Sunday evening has helped them with regards to last week when it was Wednesday and Saturday afternoon, or Saturday morning evening. So it's good news, and I think next week will be another big opportunity for them with Michelin coming up, and the fact that they're already through, it'll be a big chance to rest again. So maybe finally Liverpool can look at turning an injury corner.
Yeah, certainly. Trent and Naby Keita, they may be back with the squad for the game on Sunday. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, he said, back out on the grass, certainly for the warm-up. So hopefully he's not going to be all too far away. But Peter, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and back, I suppose, on what we were saying about Neco Williams, the performance he put in, I suppose, means that Liverpool don't really need to rush Trent back before he is 100% ready, because they don't want him to break down again, do they?
No, they don't. They can take their time a little bit with him, and you can even, Klopp loves a tactic of things of give Neco 60 minutes, 60 to 70, and then if the game presents itself, he can allow Trent some minutes just to bring him back up to match fitness. But especially against a side like Wolves, they're so dangerous, and you don't want to take unnecessary risks. So if there's a chance that injury could return to Trent, there's no reason to rush him when Neco is finding some form and is proving reliable as a deputy.
Yeah, stay with you, Peter, and ask you about Jurgen Klopp talking about sort of the fixture scheduling and all of the sort of rumblings that have been coming out of that. It was first Chris Wilder who was sort of on the chopping block. You mentioned Scott Parker today, as well as Gary Neville. Wasn't sort of too happy with what Gary Neville sort of had to say about Jurgen Klopp's way of looking at the fixture schedule.
Yeah, I'm not surprised Gary Neville got mentioned. I was watching the Monday Night Football where Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher had a very interesting debate. I think it's worth a look if anyone's missed it, although I don't think anyone would agree with every point that was made. But there were some interesting ones, and Gary Neville was very much talking like a club executive rather than a football manager. He did admit that he voted against it for Salford, and he was fearing that the bigger clubs would, have an advantage over it. And then you can see the other side of it where Klopp's thinking as a manager and thinking it's not, because I still have to leave one substitute back just for tactical reasons, or just in case something happens, disciplinary or injury or something like that. So yeah, not surprised that Gary Neville's got the brunt of it. I wonder I'm sure the weekend will crop up some kind of response from him. But it's one of those, I don't think the situation will be resolved this season. We'll probably it'll be next season, for another vote, and the 5 subs will roll on another debate of whether or not it's viable. I think a lot more clubs will probably have to suffer more injuries for them to be convinced of voting it through. I look and see, Man United have like Edison Cavani on the bench, Spurs have Gareth Bale on the bench. So the argument of bigger squads have bigger resources is true to an extent, but they can easily have 1 or 2 injuries, and those resources just aren't there anymore.
Yeah, it is an interesting point. He didn't go quite full Rafa Benitez, did he, Matt? But he did have some statistics up his sleeve from the Scottish League, and feels as though Klopp might be being rather prophetic here, sort of saying what is coming down the line now that pretty much every club in the Premier League is going to all of a sudden be playing 3 games a week, whereas a lot of them obviously have had sort of clear midweeks before weekend fixtures.
Yeah, the statistics were really interesting, actually. It's interesting, as you say, that he actually chose to research that and look into it. I think, obviously, over the next couple of months, that's always, traditionally been the most busy time of the year. I think it will still be the most busy time of the year for lots of these clubs who are not in Europe. I think the interesting thing is for Liverpool, there'll come a point, I think, where Jurgen Klopp actually will go, well, we don't want to vote now on this 5 subs thing because we've been saying it all season. We've had to suffer. Well, now it's your choice. Now, you've put yourselves into this position. If, say, in January or February time, suddenly 1 or 2 more clubs decided that they would quite like 5 subs at that point, I think, by that time, Liverpool would say, well, actually, you've had that opportunity now, and we're not going to allow that. I suppose for me, all along, it's been the case that it should have been something that has come in. The suggestion earlier this week was that the Premier League themselves are reluctant for that to happen because they think it would be an unfair thing to bring in partway through the season. But really, what is more important? Is it that, or is it player welfare? I think it's something that you've just got to balance up. But I've said it all along. I think the other side of Christmas, there'll be probably 1 or 2 more managers who think actually, 5 subs, maybe that would have been a better way to go about it. I think certainly Fulham and Crystal Palace and 1 or 2 others have sort of been a little bit on the fence. I think if you start to get 1 or 2 injuries in crucial areas, as I say, over a difficult festive period, then suddenly you can start to change your mind on that. So, yeah, I think it's an opportunity missed. And as I say, I think if Liverpool can get a few of these injured players back for the second half of the season, maybe their position will reverse the other way, and maybe we won't see it quite so much from Klopp every week because, let's be honest, he's saying it every single press conference at the moment. It's just almost like he says it, but he doesn't really believe that anything is going to change. And it's a shame, but as I say, I think there'll come a point in the season where actually it's more beneficial for Liverpool to go, well, you've denied us for the past 6 months. We're now going to deny you potentially for the final. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. But it's just a nonsense, isn't it? I think it should have been brought in from the start. The fact that it hasn't is a little bit of a surprise, but it's more a disappointment than anything else.
Yeah, the Premier League chief executive, Richard Masters, has said it's been sort of looked at a couple of times and they've decided not to go with it. But, Gorst, it was brought up in the press conference how there was a executives meeting on Thursday and Jurgen Klopp said it wasn't brought up, so therefore it wasn't something that could have been implemented. Any surprise that maybe a representative from Liverpool didn't raise it, sort of to get the conversation going with the other Premier League clubs? Because Jurgen Klopp was saying, had it been down to the managers a couple of weeks ago and they all caught up, it would have been voted through sort of 15-5 or 16-4.
Maybe, but I don't think we could speculate too much of what was said in that shareholders meeting. But Jurgen Klopp did say, didn't he, that the fact that it hasn't been broached and it hasn't been passed through is a sign, is not a good sign, he said, and is a sign that these shareholders don't particularly care about player welfare. And to be honest, I can see the argument where smaller clubs with less, smaller squads would think that 5 subs hands an unfair advantage to clubs with bigger resources. That sounds pretty obvious when you're thinking of a one-off game. But over the course of a season, if let's use Fulham as the example, if they're playing too many games and can't mix it up as often as they might be allowed to with 5 subs, then they might suffer an injury to a Mitrovic or a Lookman or whoever else it is, Anguissa, whoever their big players are, and run the risk of muscle injuries, which leaves them on the shelf for a month, for 6 weeks at a time, when they're going to be fighting and scrapping for every point. So I think in a one-off game, 5 subs does lean towards the bigger squads, but over the course of the season, I think it's the smaller squads who are going to be more impacted. Liverpool would be able to, well, they've proven it, haven't they? They are able to handle big players being out for quite a long time because they've got the squad to do it, but smaller squads can't. So there is an argument for that, but I think that maybe sometimes the bigger picture, perhaps it isn't being thought about, and it is just the likes of Chris Wilder are just thinking in one-off games if Sheffield United are playing Liverpool, because if if the smaller squads have injuries to their bigger players, then that's going to hurt them more than the bigger teams, no question.
Thought you were going to open the can of worms there of project bigger picture, but thankfully we're steering clear of that one. Peter also brought up in the press conference, of course, the return of supporters to Anfield, and Jurgen Klopp was asked about sort of if he remembers going to a game, his first game as a supporter himself, and sort of had a brilliant tell and was sort of saying that he was always a happy, a good supporter. He never got frustrated and shouted at the team.
Yeah, do we believe that? I don't know. That's another question.
They become a manager, yeah.
Yeah, have another a fierceful debate. I'm not sure. I think we're all become victims maybe to our emotions at some point. But yeah, it was a nice tale. I was quite surprised that I wasn't expecting him to have such a lengthy answer to that kind of question. But I think maybe that shows what it means to him to have fans back, and he's thinking about, maybe there's youngsters there who are going to have their first experience and they've missed out for so long that it means something to be able to look forward to something at the weekend and to get back to Anfield. And I'm looking forward to that kind of buzz. Before the build-up's been very strange without any fans. No one's traveling, no one's getting ready in the stands. So to have that buzz back again, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, can't wait to sort of see the supporters back. And another point to raise from the press conference, of course, Matt, was the admiration that Jurgen Klopp has for Nuno Espirito Santo and everything that Wolves are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's no surprise. I think they're a really well-coached team. I really like the way that they play. Some of the players they've got are fantastic to watch. Daniel Podence is one that's impressed me a lot this season. Adama Traore has been linked with Liverpool plenty of times, and Pedro Neto as well is another one who I think is really, really good. So, yeah, they've got loads of talented players. They play in a sort of system and a way that gets the best out of those players. I think if you think of someone like Connor Cody, I think the Wolves system, certainly when they play a 3 rather than a 4, suits him absolutely perfectly. And yeah, Nuno Espirito Santo is one of the best managers in the Premier League. I think he's shown that since he's been at Wolves, he's obviously brought them up, solidified them now, and there's never any sort of suggestion that they might be in any sort of danger of relegation. Quite the opposite. It's a case really this season of can they even get into the top 4 and sort of take that next step forward. So yeah, they're a fantastic team to watch, brilliantly coached, loads of good individuals, and it sets up what should be a really good clash against Liverpool at the weekend, because they haven't been scoring loads of goals, they haven't been creating loads of chances, but there's always a few goals in these sorts of games, and I think it's one, particularly under the lights, particularly with fans back, it could be a really interesting game to watch from that perspective.
Yeah, of course, they'll be without Raul Jimenez, who, of course, suffered that fractured skull against Arsenal. Our wishes, obviously, with him, and he does seem to be getting on with his recovery. But, Gorsty, would it be going too far, maybe, to say that Wolves were maybe the trickiest opponent for Liverpool last season? When you look back at both Premier League games, I think they scored early at Anfield, but, of course, VAR came to the rescue of Liverpool for once on that occasion. And then the game at Molineux really was quite a tight affair in which Wolves had a good lot of the game, but Liverpool were able to get the win over the line.
Yeah, I think so. I think looking at that Anfield game, it was just before New Year, was it? I think Liverpool were running on empty after an incredibly busy December, and they just managed to get over the line in that one. And I think Traore was on the bench for about 70 minutes of that one, luckily for Liverpool. And then the one at Molineux was a right old battle, wasn't it? I think Henderson scored early on. Wolves got back into it with Jimenez, and Traore had an excellent game. And Liverpool were kind of, once again, kind of went to the well in terms of their mental strength and pulled it out with a late winner from Firmino. And both games, I think they were only within about a month of each other, actually, and they were really, real battles. Season before was a little bit easier. I think Liverpool went there just before Christmas and quite comfortable in the end. And then I think it was the last game of the season, wasn't it? Just before the Champions League final, Liverpool won both. So Liverpool have won 4 in a row in the Premier League against Wolves, and that probably does Wolves a little bit of a disservice, because I think outside of the established top 6, you could make a case of whether Arsenal are kind of fallen away at that point. Leicester, I think, are certainly emerging, but I think Wolves are as well in terms of teams who really give this Premier League a lot of strength and depth, and it's going to be another really interesting battle on Sunday night.
Yeah, they are a big historic club of English football as well, Peter. Big, obviously, all the way back even in the 50s. But it does feel as though it's like a new Wolves. I know they have that third kit that's like a Portuguese strip as well, and they've got that Portuguese influence. But on what Gorsty was saying there, the games they've given Liverpool, they've not been like a newly promoted side. They've finished seventh in both of their full seasons back. They do tend to try and take the game to Liverpool, albeit they do have a compact nature in which they play. And Adama Traore is one man who certainly gives a few Liverpool fans cold sweats.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're a side that really they don't try and hide away when they come across a team like Liverpool. They try and, match them as best they can with, Liverpool famed for the, front three, front four now, and Wolves are trying to build the same kind of system and try and, fight fire with fire, as it were. I think it was mentioned earlier, last time I saw Wolves when they've only been up for like 3 or 4 seasons, have they, or something like that, since they were promoted, which is quite surprising when you think about it. It feels like they've been around for a lot longer, and that just goes to show what kind of team he's built in possibly a short amount of time, that they seem like they're Premier League regulars already, and that they deserve to be, fighting up amongst, Europe's elite and at least, Europa League, if not, pushing higher up. It's I find them very similar to Leicester in that regard, in how they've found a system and found players that work together with an emphasis on attacking and trying to be, that kind of staple in European exciting football.
Yeah, on that sort of note then, with the threat Wolves might pose, Matt, is it going to be a big call? I mean, we'll get onto our team selector, but will it be a big call for Jurgen Klopp maybe to stick with Caoimhin Kelleher after the performance he put in midweek?
I don't think it's a big call, to be honest. I think, obviously, Adrian's had his moments for Liverpool, but what Kelleher did midweek, it would be incredibly harsh to not put him in again. I think, obviously, we know how good he is with his feet, but he made a couple of brilliant saves as well. The one right near the end from Klaas-Jan Huntelaar, I think it was, wasn't it? The brilliant shots that he saved in that position. I think, Wolves have a very distinct style. They will try and get in behind and stuff like that. And I think Kelleher could be suited to playing against a team if Liverpool can use that high line and do what they would normally do with Alisson. I think, obviously, that's a difficult thing for him to replicate, but I certainly think he's got the ability to do that. So for me, the way that he played against Ajax means it's pretty much certain that he will play on Sunday. I think it would be a huge shock if he wasn't to be there, and there's no reason on the evidence that we saw midweek that he couldn't have a similar performance again. So look, I think it's going to be more difficult on Sunday than it was for Liverpool against Ajax, but yeah, for me, there's no doubt about it. Kelleher stays in goal.
Yeah, youngsters, Gorsty, often talk about opportunity that's afforded to them early in their careers, often through injury. And it feels with Caoimhin Kelleher that this might have come at the ideal time. During the last international break, Stephen Kenny, the Republic of Ireland manager, came out and said, Caoimhin's good enough to play for us now, but we need him to be playing consistently at club level, albeit he's going to have a tough job on his hands to get ahead of Alisson. But whilst Alisson's out, which is becoming more and more frequent, he does look like he could be a suitable understudy.
He does, yeah. Klopp said after the game on Tuesday that he was picked because of his ball playing ability, and when you watch the game, you can see what he means. He was good with his footwork, good passing off both feet, right and left, but not kind of overly. Didn't kind of indulge too much in that. He knew when to just knock it long and when to look for the pass, and that's something that I think Adrian hasn't done at times when he's deputised for Alisson. He's not Alisson with the ball at his feet. This is a player who is widely known, Alisson, as a ball-playing goalkeeper, and I think Klopp's actually said that he could play midfield if he wasn't a goalkeeper. So for Adrian to try and replicate that, I think it was against Aston Villa, you could see that immediately his kicking wasn't up to par, and it's a big part of how Liverpool play. So Kelleher was given a nod, and I thought he was very solid. Didn't have to be spectacular, but pulled off about 2 or 3 very decent saves and never looked shaky, never looked like he was going to make a mistake. And all things considered, it was a perfect night for him because this was his biggest game of his Liverpool career so far. He's obviously played in the senior team before, but not kind of in a Champions League game with quite a lot at stake, with so many established first-team players in the team with him. So I thought he passed with flying colours on Tuesday, and doesn't really deserve to be taken out the team, because I think it sends out the wrong message, to be honest. If he does come in or does drop out for Adrian, that you can come in and play as well as you want, but you're not going to be keeping your place. So I think and I hope he'll start on Sunday.
Is it a bit of a worry, Peter, how often Alisson seems to be picking up these niggly injuries, that he sort of seems to be being kept out of sort of 2 or 3 weeks at a time?
It is, but I think it's a worry for most players, especially during now, with everything we've mentioned before in terms of the season and how many games they've got to play. I think we don't quite know the nature of it. I mean, there's a few of the players, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Naby Keita, they've all picked up numerous injuries, and yes, they're all a concern. But you almost kind of have to just hope that you'll get a longer run of being fit and the injuries will only be a couple of games or so. And I think that's why we are hearing Klopp say so much why it's important for him to be able to use even more options that's available to him to try and avoid these kind of injuries. But hopefully it will only be, a couple of games. Klopp doesn't have to play him in the next Champions League game with all matters being settled. So hopefully it's only the next couple and he can be ready and waiting again.
And talking of Wolves, Matt, to come at the weekend, when the sides come out, does Jurgen Klopp need to give Nuno Espirito Santo as heartily a elbow bump as he can for the development in Diogo Jota that he oversaw before arriving at Anfield?
Yeah, very much so. It's been a fantastic start, hasn't it? Again, I'd expect to see him on Sunday. I think it's 9 goals in 15 games now for Liverpool, which is superb by anyone's standards. And yeah, we knew he was a good player. We never quite knew that he'd be quite this good quite so quickly. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because Jota wasn't necessarily a regular every single week for Wolves last season. He was in and out of the side, particularly. I think they signed Podence in January, and from that point onwards, they tended to go more with him than Jota for a lot of their games. So, yeah, we knew how good a player Jota was, but for him to sort of go from trying to get his way into a Wolves team last season to making his way into a Liverpool front three, which is as good as it is, it just goes to show really how well he's settled. I think there's been so much said about him, but the fact that he's seemingly much more consistent under Jurgen Klopp than what he was with Nuno, I think that's a huge step forward. And yeah, look, the longer he can continue the goal scoring run, the better. And I think it's just so fantastic to see that he complements the rest of the players so well and brings the best out of a couple of the other Liverpool front line as well. So yeah, it's superb to see him doing so well. And look, if he was to add another goal to his name on Sunday against his former club, I don't think any of us would be surprised, because he's just been so fantastic for Liverpool in the opening few weeks.
Yeah, and as we got a comment on the screen for those joining us on YouTube and Facebook, they'll see that it is today Diogo Jota's 24th birthday. And Gorst, I suppose that sort of underlines just how much more there could still be yet to come from him, despite the versatility and variety he's already shown in his Liverpool career, as well as being just so consistent.
Yeah, we've got quite a fair bit of coverage coming on Jota this weekend, obviously with him being the new star in the Liverpool ranks up against his old club. And he's at an age now, 24, where Liverpool fans are going to be seeing the kind of peak years of his career, aren't they? Signed a 5-year deal in September. So he's at an age now where he's a fully fledged Portuguese international, 3 caps in 8 games for them. Learning, I think he was saying this week, how he's been kind of looking up to Cristiano Ronaldo when he's been playing for Portugal, because why wouldn't you? And that can only be a good thing for Liverpool. So it's one that was Liverpool have been watching him for a number of years before they made the move back in the summer. But Liverpool, obviously, huge worldwide scouting network. They're watching so many players, aren't they? So that there's no real surprise. But I was told quite recently that Jurgen Klopp was always kind of taken aback by how well Jota played. When Liverpool were coming to analyse Wolves, he was the one who always caught the eye with his work rate and his ability to press from the front and play right across that front three, and he's almost kind of the perfect Liverpool forward in that sense. 2 great feet, underrated as far as pace goes. I think he is quite quick and he's very tenacious, isn't he? You can't just knock him off the ball, even though he is particularly slight. And as Matt says, there 9 goals in 15 Liverpool games. It looks to be early on that it's another one where they've kind of struck gold.
Yeah, certainly. And they, of course, come up against the team in Old Gold on Sunday. So let's get into our team lineups then. I think we're unanimous then maybe in saying that Caoimhin Kelleher is going to be between the sticks. Peter, I'll throw it over to you to choose the back four.
The back four, well, I'd like to see Neco Williams keep his spot as well. And then I think it'll be pretty much the same as it was against Ajax as well there. So Neco Williams, Fabinho, Matip and Andy Robertson at left back. Sure up, yeah. And I don't see a reason why it should change. And I'm not sure he has got enough options to change it.
Yeah, any interjections there, lads? Or are we happy to move into the midfield?
No reason to doubt that.
No alteration.
I think if Trent is fit and Jurgen Klopp sort of hinted at that, I'd bring him back in. But that's not to take anything away from Neco. And if there is any sort of doubt over Trent's fitness, then you don't take that risk. But I think if Trent is fit, then he'll be in that with the other 3.
Matt, do you want to take on the midfield then? Midfield 3, midfield 2?
I'm going to go for a midfield 2, which probably gives away what my front 4 might be. But yeah, I think Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum.
Gorst, did you go along with that, or would you go for a 3 up against Wolves?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Wijnaldum's played so much football. He's only missed 1 game this season. And Klopp's kind of spoken about him entering the red zone, which you'll be able to read this evening on our site. So I don't know. It's a tough one. He's so important, isn't he? But he's played plenty of football. But I suppose if he does play on Sunday, he's got a week off after that. So maybe I would stick with him and go with the same one as Matt, Wijnaldum and Henderson.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say there he's missed 1 game in 5 years. It does sometimes feel like that with Jorginho Wijnaldum. Gorsty, I'll stay with you. Then you can pick the front 4, although I think most people have probably worked it out by now.
Yeah, I think bring Roberto Firmino back in. I thought he was lively off the bench on Tuesday. He was so unlucky with the great save from Onana. He probably should have scored that one, but there was a period there where he kind of carried it 60, 70 yards, beat about 4 men, put it on a plate for, was it Salah, and the chance came to nothing. So if he can kind of, he's playing himself back into form slowly, and I think give him a chance to start from the off alongside Jota, Mane and Salah.
You going along with that as well, Peter?
Yeah. I'm stick with the same. Yeah, like Ghosty said, I really liked how Firmino looked coming off the bench, and it's a bit exciting to see that he might be coming back to the Bobby that we know.
Yeah, certainly hope that is the case. Let's give our predictions then. I'm going to say 2-0 Liverpool. Matt, what are you thinking?
I think Wolves will score. I think they've got enough quality. They don't create too many chances, but I do think they'll score. But I do think Liverpool will have enough. So I'm going to go 2-1.
Peter?
Just be different. I'm going to go 3-1 Liverpool.
And Gorsty, to finish us off, what's the score going to be at Anfield?
I think it'll be tight. I think Liverpool will nick it 1-0.
1-0. Well, there'll be 2,000 fans there, of course, cheering on the Reds. That's all from us here on the Blood Red podcast. Do make sure to keep across the Liverpool Echo over the course of the weekend. They'll build up to the game, match coverage, and much, much more. Plus, here on Blood Red, we've still plenty to come ahead of the game, including Behind Enemy Lines for our podcast listeners. Don't forget to join us on YouTube for the debrief live after Sunday's game, and we'll be back to discuss the fallout from the game on Monday's Blood Red podcast. That's all for now. Thanks for your time and your company. Bye for now.